Today, we're going on a bit of a different kind of tour. We're going to explore one of the most incredible, most intricate structures in the entire universe, the living cell. But we're not going to just look at it as a list of boring parts. No, we're going to explore it as a bustling, microscopic city. So think about this for a second. What if you were made of trillions of these tiny living cities, and every single one was working together in perfect harmony? Well, that's not science fiction. That's literally what you are. So let's get our tour started. But hang on, how did we even find out about these cities in the first place? Well, it all kicked off way back in 1665, when a guy named Robert Hooke first spotted cells in a piece of cork. Then, over the next couple hundred years, scientists like Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow started putting all the pieces together. And this led to one of the most fundamental ideas in all of biology, the cell theory. It's pretty simple, but it's also profound. 1. All living things are made of cells. 2. Every new cell has to come from another cell that already existed. And 3. The cell is the absolute basic unit of life. Okay, so here are the blueprints for two of the main types of cities we see out there, the animal cell and the plant cell. Now, they've got some pretty big differences. You can see the plant cell has that rigid wall, for instance, but they share a ton of the same districts and infrastructure. For our tour today, we're going to focus on the parts they have in common, the parts found in what are called eukaryotic cells. It's just a fancy name for complex cells, like the ones that make up, well, you. So our first stop has to be the most important building in the entire city. We're heading to the command center, also known as the nucleus. You should think of the nucleus as City Hall. This is where the master plans for everything the city does, builds, and becomes are kept. It's a high-security vault for the cell's genetic code, its DNA, and it's all protected inside this double-layered fortress called the nuclear envelope. So what makes this city hall so good at its job? It's all about controlling information. You've got these things called nuclear pores, which are like heavily guarded gates, checking the ID of everything that tries to get in or out. Deep inside, there's a special little workshop called the Nucleolus, and its whole job is to build ribosomes. We'll see why they're so important in just a minute. And the blueprints themselves? That's the chromatin. It's all the city's DNA wound up super tight and organized, so it's both safe and ready to be used at a moment's notice. All right, an order has just been sent out from the command center, so we're going to follow that order out to the factory floor and see exactly how a blueprint from the DNA is used to make one of the city's most important products, a protein. And that brings us to the city's main factory complex, the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER for short. It's got two major divisions. The rough ER, you can see it's all bumpy, is covered with those ribosomes we just mentioned. This is the main assembly line for proteins that need to be shipped out of the city or installed in the city walls. Then you've got the smooth ER. It's more of a specialized chemical plant. It's where the city makes lipids, gets rid of toxins, and stores important stuff like calcium. So how does this whole production line work? It's this beautiful four-step dance. First, back in the nucleus, a copy of a gene is made. Think of it like a photocopy of a single page from the master blueprint. That copy is called mRNA. Second, that photocopy travels out to a ribosome on the factory floor, which reads the instructions and starts building the protein, piece by piece. Third, the new protein gets folded into its proper shape inside the ER and then packed into a little shipping bubble called a vesicle. And finally, that vesicle travels to the Golgi apparatus, which is like the city's main post office and distribution center, where it gets a final stamp and is shipped off to where it needs to go. Now, all of this, building, shipping, controlling, it all requires a massive amount of energy. So our next stop is maybe the most crucial of all. We're going to the city's power grid, the mitochondria. You've heard this a million times, right? The powerhouse of the cell. It's the most famous nickname in biology, and it has absolutely 100% earned that title. But how does it actually do it? How does it generate all that power? A mitochondrion is basically a tiny biological engine. It takes fuel from the food you eat, things like glucose, and through a whole bunch of chemical reactions, it converts that fuel into something called ATP. ATP is the universal energy currency of the cell. It's the juice that powers everything. And look at its structure. It has this smooth outer membrane, but the inner one is folded over and over again. Those folds, called cristae, give it a huge surface area, making it an incredibly efficient little power plant. Okay, so here's the quick and dirty on how that engine works. First, fuel from broken down glucose enters the power plant. Then, it goes through something called the Krebs cycle, which basically rips it apart and generates these high-energy particles.
Those particles then go to that folded inner membrane and pass their energy down an assembly line of proteins. This whole process powers an unbelievable molecular turbine, this enzyme that physically spins around and just churns out huge amounts of ATP. It is a stunningly efficient biological machine.
But here's where it gets really fascinating. Mitochondria are so much more than just power plants. They're also mission control for things like cell communication using calcium as a signal. They're the ones that push the self-destruct button when a cell is too damaged to be repaired. They even help generate heat to keep our bodies warm. I mean, talk about a multitasker. Okay, a city this busy and this productive, it's going to create a lot of waste, and it needs a really solid infrastructure to keep from just collapsing. So let's take a look at the essential city services that keep this whole metropolis running smoothly. First up, we've got the sanitation and recycling department, the lysosomes. Think of these as little sacs filled with really powerful digestive enzymes. They're the cleanup crew. They go around breaking down cellular garbage, recycling old and worn-out parts, and can even trigger the complete demolition of the cell if it's beyond repair. Then you've got the city's hazmat team, the peroxisomes. Their job is way more specialized. They handle the really dangerous chemical byproducts of metabolism, stuff like hydrogen peroxide. They're the ones who swoop in and neutralize the toxic waste to keep the whole city safe. And what actually holds this entire city together and gives it its shape? That's the cytoskeleton. And it's not a rigid, bony skeleton. It's a dynamic, ever-changing network of protein fibers. You've got microfilaments, which are like the local roads that help things move. You've got intermediate filaments, which are like the steel girders, giving the city its strength. And then you've got the microtubules. These are the major highways, the railway tracks that are used to transport big cargo from one end of the city to the other. It provides shape, strength, and the entire logistics network. For our final stop on this tour, we're heading to the city limits, to the highly intelligent, incredibly dynamic border that we call the cell membrane. Now, this is not just some simple wall. The cell membrane is a sophisticated, selectively permeable barrier. That's just a fancy way of saying it's the ultimate bouncer. It meticulously controls every single thing that comes into the city and everything that leaves, making sure the environment inside is always just right for life. So how does it work? Well, its main structure is this flexible foundation called the phospholipid bilayer. Tucked inside are cholesterol molecules, which act like a regulator, making sure the membrane doesn't get too stiff in the cold or too floppy in the heat. And then, embedded all throughout, you have the proteins. These are the real gatekeepers. They are the channels, the pumps, and the communication antennas that manage everything coming and going. So as we zoom out, you can just see it all, everything working together. The command center issuing orders, the factories churning out products, the power plants fueling all the work, and all the city services keeping things clean and organized. Every single one of these microscopic cities is a complete, intricate world, a whole universe of perfectly coordinated activity. And the crazy thing is, this city never sleeps. It's always on, always working. When you think about its staggering, almost unbelievable complexity, all of it born from a simple genetic blueprint, it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does this intricate, self-sustaining world, trillions of which make up you, really suggest about the nature of life itself?